Hello, everybody. Thank you. Well, glancing through a Bob Le book catalog, I came across the irresistible title, An Elderly Lady is Up to No. That brings me here this afternoon. I also discovered there is a sequel, An Elderly Lady Must Not Be Crossed. And these are the tiny volumes lying in my name. Oh, I love them. Yeah. The author of these very amusing collections is Helene Turst, a highly successful Swedish writer with a rather unusual background. The book notes tell us she was a nurse and a dentist before she turned to writing. She's the author of 2 mystery series set in Gothenburg, Sweden, where she was born and where she now lives with her husband and daughter. After spending years writing about honest people who worked hard to uphold the law, Elaine was inspired to write about someone on the other side. As she tells it, one of the biggest publishers in Sweden asked me for a story for their Christmas anthology. I said yes, but then I realized that I didn't know what story to tell. The deadline came closer and I felt totally empty. I almost panicked. And then she came to me more. She is 88 years old and looks like most old grannies, but inside she was quite special. Her age was a perfect disguise for a even a murderer. I wrote the first story, An Elderly Lady Seeks Peace at Christmas Time, in just 3 hours, and I enjoyed every minute of her company. But let's just say I would not like to have her for a neighbor or relative. Thus, the collection of stories featuring the irascible Maud. And that first contribution to a promising future is what I've chosen to read to you today. The Elderly Lady Seeks Peace at Christmas Time. Smaller print. The churchyard was silent and peaceful so early in the morning of Christmas Eve. Maud couldn't help but sigh loudly as she strolled along the snow-covered path. It didn't matter because she was all alone. At this time of day, there wasn't a living soul in sight, and she was unlikely to disturb the others. The rubber wheels of her walker twisted sideways as she plowed through the deep snow. But after a certain amount of difficulty, she eventually managed to park it next to the grave. She took a couple of special grade side lanterns and a box of matches out of the bag in the wheeled walker's wire basket. 2 lanterns on the family grave would have to do, one for her parents and one for her sister. Such things were expensive, they said. Maud had been a late couple. She had come along 11 years after Charlotte's birth, much to her parents' surprise and her sister's disgust. Being an only child had suited Charlotte perfectly. A little sister definitely wasn't on her wish list. Maud suddenly thought back to the lavish parties her parents used to show. In particular, she remembered the big party they traditionally hosted on New Year's Eve. She recalled the delicious food, the candles burning brightly in the tall candelabra, the champagne corks popping at midnight, the hum of cheerful voices, the smell of cigars and expensive perfume, and of course the beautiful dresses ladies. Everything had come to an abrupt end when her darling father suffered a heart attack during an odd fellows meeting. He had collapsed in the middle of a guffaw after someone told him an amusing story. But for a number of reasons, Maud's mother had very little left about after his death. Her mother was 15 years younger than her father and ought to have been able to forge on, but it was as if all the strength had simply drained out and been married alone. 2 years later, she too was dead. Maud often thought that the shame of their financial and social disgrace had probably broken her love. She herself had been 18 when the final blow struck the family. She had just started college, where she was training to be a teacher of English and French. A year or so earlier, Charlotte had developed what her mother referred to as nerves. Apparently, Charlotte was a sensitive, artistic soul. Although she was a trained pianist, she had never performed in public, nor would she cope with teaching piano. The limited amount of capital that was left after the sale of the property diminished rapidly during the war. Maud's teaching salary was barely enough to cover costs. Of course, being able to live rent-free certainly helped their situation, but they still had to pay the utility bills for the large space. Maud remembered how bitterly cold the apartment had been during those terrible winters. The ice that had formed on the inside of the windows was so thick they couldn't see out. They lived in the kitchen and the bedroom next door, keeping the doors tightly closed to retain any warmth. The other rooms were left unheated. The flickering flames of the candles illuminated the worn inscription on the tall gravestone. Charlotte had died 37 years ago. Only then had Maud's own life begun. Better late than never, she thought. The cold nipping at her toes brought her back to the present. Her boots were warm, but the lining was getting thin and threadbare. Perhaps it was time to buy a new pair. She began to laboriously maneuver the walker along toward the path, which had been clear. Heavy snow had fallen overnight. When she listened carefully, she could hear a distant rumble that sounded as if it might be a tractor. A harsh scraping confirmed her suspicions. The snowplow was on its way. She congratulated herself on the fact that there was nothing wrong with her hearing. Most of her contemporaries were practically deaf, but not all, which was perhaps a shame. If she had been, she wouldn't have been troubled by the problem. Resolutely, she pushed all thoughts of the problem aside and set off toward the bus stop, which was just outside the churchyard gate. She was quite out of breath by the time she got there and had to sit down for a while on the waterproof seat. It was such a handy gadget. Not that she really needed such a thing for the most part. It had been left behind when Herr Olson, civil engineer, passed away. None of his children had bothered to collect it. They probably didn't even know that the wheeled walker, which he had kept just inside the door of the building, belonged to their father. After his apartment had been cleared and sold, it was still standing there, and Maud had simply picked it up and carried it into her own. Last fall, she had twisted her knee when she tripped over a rug and had reluctantly started to use it when she had to go out shopping. The sidewalks were very icy at the time. She didn't want to risk falling again. She quickly became aware of its advantages. It provided this was a board. She could sit on it and rest. She was suddenly offered a seat on the bus. People held the door open for her when she went into the stores. And middle-aged female shop assistants started treating her politely. And well, they really were quite sweet to her. Walker was a brilliant acquisition. Once she was safely aboard the bus, but her thoughts turned to Charlotte once more. Her sister had crept all around their big, roomy apartment like a restless soul, refusing to go out. Her mental state deteriorated rapidly during the 1960s. There was no point in suggesting that Maud might go away, and even for one day. Her sister would go even crazier than she already was. Little Charlotte couldn't possibly manage all on her own. Who would look after her meals and make sure she took her medication? Who would be there when the fear dug its claws into it? Worst thing was that it was all true. As Charlotte's illness gradually got worse, she needed stronger and stronger medication. She spent most of her time in a befuddled torpor. She should really have gone into an institution, but whenever her doctor suggested some kind of residential care, Charlotte always came to life and said sharply, "My sister would never have done such a thing. She and I have always worked together. She was happy." Charlotte had been totally dependent on her sister for her daily care and survival. It didn't look as if Maud would ever have the opportunity to realize her own dreams. At least not until the evening when Maud was standing in the kitchen and suddenly felt a cold draft. She hurried out to see what was going on and found the front door standing open. In her confused state, Charlotte had managed to unlock the door and had wandered out of the apartment. Maud sensed rather than saw her sister moving past the elevator door. There was a wide landing outside the elevator, with a staircase leading down to the main door of the apartment block. By the faint light seeping out from the elevator, Maud was just able to make out Charlotte's thin figure flitting anxiously to her. "Hello," her voice echoed. Slowly she moved closer to the edge of the room. The stairs themselves were in total darkness. From Maud's point of view, it looked as if her sister were inching toward a black hole along steep stone stairs. Paralysis passed. She rushed toward the open door of the apartment. Charlotte was balancing on the top step. Maud had fallen out perfection. She definitely tried to grab hold of her sister, hadn't she? She remembered feeling the slippery fabric of Charlotte's checked bathrobe against her fingertips. Her sister pulled away and then disappeared down into the depths of her heart. 3 weeks later, Charlotte had passed away as a result of the serious concussion she had sustained. Maud spent every minute by her bedside. Her sister never regains consciousness, and that's when Maud's life changed. The ICA Gourmet Grocery Store opened at 9 o'clock in the morning, Christmas Eve. Maud could see the manager unlocking the door as he stepped off. She plodded over to the manager waved to her. "Good morning. You're bright and early." So we called out children. Maud smiled back at him. He was the person she spoke to more than anyone else these days. "I thought I'd get my shopping done before all those stressed out people start rushing around." "Very well, very wise indeed," the manager said with a chuckle as he stacked boxes of raisins into a neat pyramid. The little store had been there for as long as Maud could remember. To begin with, it had sold out only dairy products, but then it had expanded to become a mini. Nowadays, it was a gourmet grocery store selling ready meals that could simply be heated up in the oven or microwave. They were prepared in a restaurant kitchen just a few miles away. The store also sold other delicious foods such as fine cheeses, exotic fruits, fresh bread baked on premises, and all the other light essentials. Maud placed two small cartons of roll marks in the basket, followed by a larger pack of herring salad. They were soon joined by a silver cheese and a blue porcelain pot, a mature urban soda, a piece of ripe bread, a packet of salted crackers, and artisan loaf that was still warm, a bunch of grapes, fresh dates, a jar of fig preserves, two bottles of Yuletist, the traditional Christmas soft drink, a small pack of new potatoes from Canaries, a few clementines, and a box of after eight. She was very pleased to find a portion of Jansen's temptation in the prepared food section, quickly added it to her basket. Now there was only one thing missing from her Christmas tree. She pushed the walker over to the charcuterie stand. The young man, who in Maud's opinion looked as if he was barely out of short pants, was fiddling aimlessly with the pre-packaged sausages on a shelf in front of the glass counter. Maud stepped beside him and said, "I'd like a small, ready-cooked Christmas ham." The young man pulled out one of his earbuds. "What?" Hastily, Maud repeated what she had just said. "Ready cooked?" the boy echoed. Maud nodded. "I can, like, cut you some slices of that big one up there. All the small ones are gone. There are so many old dudes living in." Maud thought his grin had something of a sneer about it. With considerable self-control, she nodded to indicate that she would like some slices of the ham behind the glass of the sugar. As the boy walked past her, he let out a loud yell that could be heard all over the store. The manager came rushing over with his pyramid of raisins, knocking the whole thing down in his panic. "What's going on?" he moaned to him, something horrible. "The old bat stabbed me," he said, pointing an accusing finger at Maud. She stooped over the handlebars for a walker. "What? What's he saying?" she said in a reedy voice. The manager looked from Maud to the assistant, unsure what to do. "Go to the staff of the man, calm her down," he snapped. "But the old bat, don't call the customer and all up that word, manager." His face turned dark shade bright red. "What did he say?" She was finding it difficult not to laugh. Carefully, she flourished the big safety pin, slipped it back into her pocket. She had thrust it into that unpleasant young man's stomach with all her strength. It was time someone taught him a lesson about old women. The pin was used to attach a reflective disc on the pole to the lining of her right hand pocket, so she would be visible to motorists during the dark days of winter. "Staff room now," the manager repeated in a tone that brooked no disagreement. As the teenager shambled away, the manager turned to Maud with a strange smile. "Please forgive the boy. He only been here for a few days. He probably tripped and banged into a sharp counter. What can I get you?" "I'd like four slices of wrinkled ham. It's always so delicious." Smiling sweetly, she carried the wheeled walker up the wide stone stairway. There was no longer any sign of the bad little old lady who had been so bewildered by us in the grocery store. For someone who would be 90 in a few years, she was unusually strong. A short while later, she was sitting in her favorite armchair with a steaming cup of coffee and a ham sandwich with plenty of mustard. Spiced rye bread, flavored with wool, smelled wonderful. She put on her glasses and began to read morning paper. That was when the father began to make his presence. Maud looked at the phone. It was just before 10:30. That was unusually early for the father. She sighed loudly and decided to try to ignore the whole thing for as long as possible. Her relief, the problem stopped after a few minutes, and she was able to carry on. At around 2 o'clock, Maud was woken from her afternoon nap. The problem was in full swing. It seemed worse than ever. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't. The apartment building was 5 stories high and over 100 years old. It was red brick, built on a solid granite foundation. The ground floor housed a parking lot and a small workshop. Despite the fact that Maud lived in the first floor, her window was almost 15 feet. The walls were thick. The only weakness was the system of pipes. If Maud was standing in the bathroom, she could hear almost every word from the neighbors from the floor above, particularly they raised their voices. That she couldn't pretend she didn't know about it, which was what she would like to do. Avoid getting involved. All she wanted was peace and quiet. But the problem couldn't be Maud couldn't shut out the sound of raised voices, mainly his, and the woman's sobbing, and the heavy thuds when he hit her and knocked her down. Thump, thump, thud was the sound that came through the ceiling of Tom's bed. The problem had begun the previous fall when a famous attorney and his wife bought the apartment above Maud's. They were middle-aged and wealthy, and their children had already left home. According to the rumors, he had kicked up on an enormous fuss when he wasn't allocated parking space and had to put his name on the waiting list like all the other ones. He didn't like parking his flashing Mercedes on the street. After renovations lasting several months, the attorney and his wife had moved in just before Christmas. Peace and rest, modern thought. Construction has been unbearable. Over the Christmas period, exactly 1 year ago, Maud had realized that there was a baby. Christmas Eve was completely ruined as far as she was concerned. The attorney had started abusing his wife in the afternoon and simply carried on. Maud had been unable to concentrate on the film starring Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers on TV last night. All she could hear was quarreling, shouting from upstairs. Early on December 26th, and it was turned up. Maud opened the door of her apartment just enough to hear the attorney's well interview. She fell down the stairs yesterday. He said, I wanted to call you right away, but she didn't think it was anything serious. When I saw how she looked today, I just had to call. Maud closed the door and screwed her face up in disgust. Fell down the stairs. What a revolting man. He had ruined her Christmas. After that, things were quiet for a few months. Twice during the spring, she heard the attorney abusing his wife again. The week after midsummer, Maud met the wife on the stairs. It was pouring outside, but the woman was wearing huge sunglasses. She had wound a beige scarf around her head and pulled it well down over her forehead. Her entire face was covered with a thick layer of dark foundation. It didn't help. Maud could clearly see the eye that was swollen shut and the bruise like a purple half moon over the cheek. They exchanged greetings and the woman scurried past. The charming attorney himself That was obvious to no one whenever they passed up the stairs. He usually ignored her, but she couldn't miss the alcoholic fumes that lingered in his wake long after he had disappeared up the stairs of his car. And now it was Christmas Eve, and the problem was raising its ugly head. Bob could hear the attorney's furious voice, his wife's sobs, thump, thump, in the familiar sound. It's high time she did something. Deep down, I had already made the decision before the idea began to form. Just she went into the hall. The voices emerged clearly from the toilet, and the ventilation duct amplified the sound. Bitch, you subjected bitch. Bang, bang, thud. Maud clenched her fist in anger that flared inside her made her heart beat faster. Sort out your face. You can't go out to the parking meter looking like that. And turned his voice in through the voice. Maud heard a sniveling mumble in response. I have to do everything myself. You are such a disgustingly like mess. I'm going downstairs to get another pass. You can't even do that properly. You were supposed to get a 24-hour pass. What do you mean you don't have any? Don't you dare. Heavy footsteps across the floor, moving toward the hallway. She quickly hurried into her own home. Cautiously, she opened her front door, left it on the latch. She pushed the wheel walker, landed, placed it next to the elevator. Anyone coming down the stairs on the other side wouldn't be able to see it, nor would anyone standing up. The door of the stairwell was lit by a brass Art Nouveau style lamp with a tulip-shaped glass shade. Without hesitation, Maud reached in and unscrewed the bulb. Now it would come. As she heard the door opening in the door, while she positioned herself behind the wheel of walk, she gripped the rubber handles firmly and waited. So the attorney stumbled down the stairs. He was playing with the loose change in his coat pocket, trying to scoop it into his hand. He stopped right outside the elevator, fiddling with his phone. Well, I could have reached out and touched his right shoulder. His boozy breath in her nostrils. Not enough cash. Have to use my card. Can't see a blankety thing. Swaying unsteadily, the attorney moved toward the wide marble stair. When he reached the edge of the top step, she summoned all of her strength and shot across the landing, cannoning into his calves with what the? That was all the attorney managed to say before he lost his balance and tumbled down the stairs, his arms waving helplessly. The dark, flapping overcoat made it look like a clumsy bat, or possibly a vampire. Maud thought as she hurried back to her. She did, however, remember to screw the ball back in place before she released. She parked the wheel of the walker just behind the door as usual. She didn't bother checking to see whether the attorney was still alive. The heavy thud when he hit the floor at the bottom of the staircase, it sounded like only when Maud heard the siren stop wailing outside the door of the apartment block as she opened her home. The neighbor opposite was standing in the stairwell, well, looking terribly upset. What's going on? Maud asked, taking Edgar to hear slightly. Oh, I'm so glad you're home. We're just going to ring the bell. It's the lawyer. He's fallen down the stairs. The neighbor attended to explain. A young police officer came up and introduced himself to both women. Do you happen to know who the gentleman is? He asked politely. He was addressing the neighbor who was at least 20 years young. She told him the attorney's name, where he lived. The police officer nodded and said, he would go and tell the man's wife what had happened. Those stairs aren't easy. My sister fell down. All said, pointing with a trembling finger. All at once the neighbor wanted. But mom, it's before Gunnar and I moved in, and we lived here for 30 years. She said, giving the police officer a meeting. She placed her protective arm around mom's shoulders and steered her toward her home. Let's get you inside. You're very welcome to join us this evening. Provide with the children and grandchildren coming over after they've watched on the television, so it might be a bit too noisy. The invitation they made hanging in the air. And Mom quickly grabbed it. No, no, thank you, she said. It's very kind of you, but no, thank you. I thought it. Behind her, she heard one of the paramedics say this call. You stay inside of the story. The ambulance and the police car. Someone had come to collect the attorney's leaving water. Maud arranged all the goodies she had bought for the Christmas dinner on a teapot. She poured herself an ice cold Albert aqua leaf to go with her. It had been a stressful day. She felt that she had earned it. The delicious aroma of Jansen's temptations coming from the oven. Satisfied with the sight of the maiden heart, she pushed it into the TV room and sank down into her armchair, sighed contentedly. At long last, the piece of Christmas descended. No. Fun. There are 5 or 6 stories in each of them. She's such a
I think we all ladies can relate to that.
Has there ever been anyone you want to push with your wallet?
Staying out of the stairwells.
Yes.
You took me back though, the first time I ever went to Sweden was Gothenburg, my husband had a dear friend there. And I could honestly picture the building. Yeah, I mean, it was so clear.
Yeah. Yeah, Ken just wonderful touch with right? Yeah. And as you can see, she's written these 2 since she started on this new series of Maud. Maud's is wiping out anyone who gets in. Not very so. Of course she did.
Once I start carrying safety pins with.
Yeah, it's very big time for busy times. Yeah.
Well, I did you.
But you're all welcome to respond.
Yeah.
I was afraid it was gonna be Amazonian.
Perfect. And you're absolutely. I think is perfect.
But I was amazed. I was gonna be
Did she also push her sister down the stairs 35 years earlier?
Yeah.
Yeah. She felt. That's.
She
Yeah, great job.
She certainly did the best of it.
She had this.
She did sit with her for 3 weeks.
Sitting next to you and Spain.
I know.
I might be operating here on good.
Watching it.
We were talking for her.
Yeah.
One of those apartment buildings. Yeah.
We were in Gothenburg and it was cold, it was winter, it was far in. And this is one thing.
Most could sing it. Oh, Ben.
I have a weapon.
I can see that. Wow.
He pulled his car over so that his dog, my manager, my fear, I do the wild, because it was which I was. Saying, you know, I'm killing himself. But it doesn't understand that. The most wonderful human beings in after. When Sam asked him, oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, but it was, I said, you know, it was, to softness toward others. He also was a physician. I was. He and I just.